Welcome to Conozca sus derechos, Know Your Rights. This program is brought to you by the Hispanic Bar Association of Central Florida. I am Camila Pachon Silva, the Community Relations Chair of the organization, and it is my pleasure to be here with you today. The mission of the show is to inform the community of important legal topics affecting our community. Today, we will be talking about a problem that is seriously affecting our community. We will be talking about human trafficking in Central Florida. I am very honored to have two excellent speakers here with me today. First, we have Tomas Lares. Tomas, can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. I wear two hats in the community. One is I'm the founder, executive director of Florida Abolitionists, which is a nonprofit fighting human trafficking through preventative and restorative solutions. Mm-hmm. And also I'm the co-founder and chairman of the Greater Orlando Human Trafficking Task Force.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. And then last but not least, we have Mr. Rowland. Can you please tell us a little bit more about you?
Yes, I'm from the Orlando Police Department. I'm a civilian employee. I'm a community service officer, but I'm assigned to the Chief's Office of Violent Crime Initiatives. And so what I do is I coordinate our agency's efforts and awareness on topics like domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, sexual assault, and human trafficking.
Okay, well, thank you both for being here with me today. Tomas, I want to start with the very basics. There's a lot of misconceptions about human trafficking. I think when people in the community think about human trafficking, many think mail order bride, and we know that's not the case. So what is human trafficking?
Well, human trafficking, I think, just in a simple layman's term, is anytime somebody, there's force, fraud, or coercion used to either sexually exploit or through forced labor, mm-hmm. a victim against their will. And it's usually, there has to be a commercial exchange in that exploitation to make it human trafficking.
Okay. Rowland, does human trafficking happen in Central Florida?
Indeed it does. I mean, the most common manifestation would be in prostitution, is that you would see that people are being controlled by other people. People are doing that not because of their own free will, but because other people are compelling them to do that, and also taking all the profits from that enterprise too.
Okay, so Tomas, and Rowland was speaking about sex trafficking. Do you think that labor trafficking occurs here in Orlando or in the Central Florida area?
Absolutely. And we have actually survivors of labor trafficking and mm-hmm. Domestic servitude over the years.
Okay, so who are these victims?
These victims, well, for labor trafficking, mm-hmm. Many are foreign born, and they come here to Florida thinking they're going to have a great job. They are legal. Okay. Most that I've worked with have been legal. And so they come on a certain visa, and they end up, they were deceived by whoever the employer was, and they end up having to work other jobs. And the conditions, Camila, just get worse. There ends up being debt bondage put on them. They end up being really all their actions controlled. Their documents are taken from them. And then there's threats that if they go to the authorities, that they'll be deported. You know, they may be said they're going to be blacklisted in their country of origin. So
what would you say is the difference between just exploitation and trafficking?
Well, I think exploitation is occurring, unfortunately, all the time, whether it be violation of labor laws. But with human trafficking, it is different because there's the force, fraud, and coercion again. There's okay. complete deception on what the intended purpose of that job was, if it's labor. If it's sex trafficking, a lot of times they're told, you know, they're just gonna have to model or be an escort, just going on dates. And it turns into either forced prostitution, or we call forced pornography, or they're, basically there's no compensation for what they're doing.
Okay, and Rowland, you mentioned that sex trafficking is related to prostitution, and out in the community there's many people who say, well, prostitution is a voluntary thing. These women are choosing to be involved in this. What is the difference between prostitution and sex trafficking?
I'm glad you mentioned that, and we were talking about this a little bit before the show. It's great to be a part of really an awakening where we say as a society that this isn't okay and that this isn't really what's happening here. And you know, the first group we needed to take the blinders off was law enforcement itself, and to realize that these people, no one wants to go and have sex with somebody 2.5 times their age, and then get paid for it, and then hand that payment off to somebody else. And once we were able to, you know, really get past that, we made a lot of progress in being able to train our officers and the community in recognizing and learning how to respond to those signs.
So you mentioned that the first step is taking those blinders off. So is law enforcement being trained to be able to recognize those signs, be able to determine this is just not a prostitution case, there's something else that goes beyond that?
Two of our most prominent cases really reflect how well trained our officers are. Okay. The one was an attempted kidnapping at a movie theater in Orlando of a person who was trying to leave the lifestyle, and they were, and we get the call, and the call doesn't come in as human trafficking.
Right.
The call never comes in as human trafficking. But we get the call, and it took us a few days to sort it out, but we were able to figure out what it was, and actually that led to a successful prosecution.
Okay.
In another case, we had an officer who had been recently trained on that. He's recovering a missing person, and the missing person's talking to somebody in the other room. He picks up on the fact, or he listens very carefully. He hears how she was not allowed to leave.
Okay.
And so, you know, that wound up being a very interesting criminal case. I'm not sure what the disposition is on that.
Okay, and just to get a little bit more information about the attempted kidnap, you said that happened here in Orlando at a movie theater. What happened then?
What happened was the person was trying to leave. They were contacted by another person who was being prostituted, and when they met, the truck spun up, and one of the people was supposed to shove her in the back of in the back door of the passenger seat of the pickup truck, and they didn't, and she was able to get away. But of course, this caused quite a stir, and so the police were called to find out, and she was initially uncooperative, but we were able to determine what kind of crime was really happening there.
Okay, and that you said that resulted in a successful prosecution.
Yeah, one of the first really successful prosecutions.
That's great. So you guys work with the state attorney's office, and it's my understanding that they're also being trained, and then they're becoming more aware that this is an issue that needs to be prosecuted as a way of preventing this from happening in the future.
It certainly is, and we're well represented at the Human Trafficking Task Force with prosecutors from not just Orlando, but Seminole County also.
Okay. So, Tomas, who are the traffickers? Who are the people who are doing this?
Wow, it really ranges, and a lot of the myths or the misconceptions, people think of a trafficker or even a pimp, of the imagery of the pimp from the 1970s with the fur coat and maybe the feathered hat. And the traffickers and pimps are they're men, all different races. There's sometimes women. Sometimes they're even as young as 18, 19 years old. Okay. And so the trafficker, it is somebody who's involved, obviously, in this organized crime and looking to profit by selling humans.
Okay, so it pretty much can be anybody.
Yes.
Is there a pattern, or are there characteristics that they all have in common?
I think just the really the manipulation, control, those tactics that they use to really recruit their victims and then control them when they have them. That's pretty much the common factor.
And how about the victims, Rowland? In your experience, do you think that there is a common characteristic that all the survivors share?
I do believe that, and I see, you know, they're exploited on their vulnerabilities. Okay. And the first one, the greatest at-risk population, I would say, would be runaway girls. Okay. You know, and that they can be manipulated They need their basic needs met, and then they're being told, well, you know, I can make you a model. We can do this. I can help you. I'll be your boyfriend, but I need you to help me out with something first.
So are these women or are these girls people that don't have a family or a father or a mother in their lives?
Not always.
Okay.
Not always, but frequently you'll see single parent homes, and you know, when I was on patrol, I was struck by how many young girls would leave at this certain age, and it was because they would ultimately survive. It wasn't like when you're 7 or 8 years old and you really need your parents' care, but that's the population that really now they're doing everything that they can to survive.
Well, thank you for being here today. Let's take a quick break. We will be right back, and we will continue to discuss this horrible crime of human trafficking and how is it happening here in Central Florida. Welcome back to Conozca sus Derechos, Know Your Rights, a program brought to you by the Hispanic Bar Association of Central Florida. I am Camila Pachon Silva, Community Relations Chair of this organization. Today, we're continuing our discussion about human trafficking, what it is, and how does it affect our community. Today, here with us, we have Mr. Rowland Klee and Mr. Tomas Lares. Tomas, I wanted to go back to the previous segment. It seems that this issue, the best way to combat this issue is by collaboration. So who are the stakeholders in the community that are dealing with this issue right now?
Sure. I'm proud to say, Camila, that the stakeholders in Central Florida have really come together. Those stakeholders include governmental and non-governmental organizations, law enforcement, businesses, immigrant groups, law firms, faith-based groups.
Okay.
And so it's been an incredible collaboration, especially in these last 2 years in our task force. And we've just seen, we have 16 subcommittees at the Greater Orlando Human Trafficking Task Force. And we've also been instrumental in helping the 8 counties surrounding Greater Orlando to start their own task force and or working group.
Okay. Do you work with other agencies outside of the state or other task forces around the state?
What's been interesting is because we have seen victims from other states, and so we have begun to build communication and also refer clients. Maybe they want to go back to their home state.
Okay.
They were taken from a state or got recruited by a trafficking ring and ended up in Florida. And so I've seen already 5 different states that we have worked with their task force to make sure that when the victim gets back home, they have those wraparound services.
And at the law enforcement level, Rowland, does law enforcement work with other agencies?
Well, we refer most of our cases to the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation, which covers the entire 9th Circuit of Central Florida, which is Orange and Osceola counties.
Okay.
So it's 3 law enforcement agencies in Osceola County and 13 municipalities in Orange County. And the group that, the investigative unit that investigates these crimes, it's grown from like three officers from basically being a vice unit to being an anti-human trafficking.
Okay. So who is in charge of investigating human trafficking?
Well, those would go to those undercover agents, those detectives assigned to MBI.
MBI, okay.
Yeah.
So how many agents do you now have within MBI that are in charge of investigating human trafficking cases?
Right now we have, I believe it's 8 agents and a supervisor,
Okay.
and the agents come from FBI, FDLE, Orlando PD, Orange County Sheriff's Office, and a state attorney's office sworn investigator.
Okay, so there's also collaborations within law enforcement.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. So if, as a law enforcement official, what would be your recommendation if somebody out in the community who's seeing this show thinks that what they're seeing, what they're observing is human trafficking? What should they do?
Well, if you see it happening now, I want you to call 911 immediately and
Okay.
get an officer to respond out there. But if you have the suspicion that something has been going on over a period of time, then we'd encourage you to contact the Polaris Hotline.
Okay. And then, Tomas, what are those red flags that the community needs to be careful with and need to be on the lookout for to be able to recognize somebody who's being trafficked?
Sure, I think the biggest thing, Camila, is that if they see somebody that looks like they're being controlled, or a lot of times that the victims we've worked with were not able to ever be alone. And I'll give you an example. One of our survivors would go to the emergency room, and the trafficker would never let her be alone when she would be checked out. And so that's a sign, and we are working with the Florida Emergency Room Physicians Association and being able to train the personnel in emergency rooms that there needs to be a separation. The survivor says that, he would say, her boyfriend, and I have to be here. And so that was a clear sign in our eyes that there was control going on. They never want them to be separated. And so that's
one of the signs. So one of the signs, they have somebody with them at all times that tends to speak for them, that tends to control them. Anything else? Are there any other red flags to be careful?
Well, I think now in Florida, for example, massage parlors, it's illegal to be open between midnight and 6 in the morning.
Okay.
So that was a law passed over a year ago. And we get calls and reports, especially to the Polaris Hotline, which we're connected with, that there's massage parlors that are open at 3 in the morning, and there's people being seen going in and out. And so that's something that the community could call the Polaris Hotline and report that.
Okay. And then the Polaris website, people can go to a website to get that phone number. How do they go about getting that Polaris hotline?
We have that on the Greater Orlando Human Trafficking Task Force website, which is gohttf.org.
Okay, can you repeat that again, please?
Sure, gohttf.org.
Okay, perfect.
And the Polaris number and other numbers, including the DCF hotline, is on that.
Okay. And Rowland, how are these traffickers getting their victims?
They're doing it a variety of ways, and law enforcement generally isn't involved in it at that level.
Right.
What we do is we find out later was that they've set up a fake modeling agency per se, or they've promised people a promise of work.
Okay.
When there really wasn't any work for them to be done. There wasn't anything where they'd be able to independently manage their own finances or anything like that. It would constantly be something that they'd be coerced into doing something for somebody else.
Okay. How about you, Tomas? What do you think? How are these traffickers finding their victims?
Well, again, like Rowland said, it's all about vulnerability.
Okay.
And so we've heard one of the cases he referred to, the kidnapping at the movie theater.
Right.
She was originally recruited, the young lady that wanted to escape, in downtown Orlando.
Okay.
And so they recruited her. She was a very beautiful young lady and said she could be a model. And so they actually went up to her in downtown, and she was 14 at the time.
Wow. So how long was she under the traffickers' control? Or?
In that particular case, I want to say it was almost 2 years, I want to say, between when things were happening. And so that's where law enforcement, a lot of times these cases, they have to investigate. It's not just like it is with domestic violence or child abuse that you go to the alleged perpetrator's door and knock on it and be able to take care or investigate. These cases are sometimes, there's long investigations. They have to prove what's going on.
Okay. But I've also read online and I've heard some people discuss the existence of this website, Backpage. What is Backpage, Rowland?
Backpage is like a version of Craigslist that's being used for the purpose of posting online ads in different markets. It's something people purchase these ads, and they offer services in that nature. They generally won't say openly, "Hey, there's this prostitution ad," but the implication is there. It's like, "Hey, I want to have a friend. Can you contact me?" And they're set up all over the state. So if someone's located in Orlando, they'll be on the Fort Pierce Backpage, or really all over the place under names that they don't even know that they've been posted under.
So does law enforcement monitor that website for investigations? Okay.
We do.
So has it occurred that maybe the shutting down of that website, would that work?
It would certainly work, but it's an enterprise that we haven't been successful in shutting it down at this time.
Right. And Tomas, you were mentioning the example that you gave was of somebody who was trafficked for over 4 years. What is it like for somebody who has been in that situation under those circumstances for 4 years? What happens afterwards?
Wow. Well, thank goodness for the power of collaboration. In our task force, we have stakeholders that are trained and ready. And for example, in Florida Abolitionists, we have a wonderful victim services department, and the victim advocate will go on scene many times when there is a recovery or identification of a victim, and we're able to immediately build rapport and let them know we're there to help them. And then they have options now. It's taken a while, but there are safe houses for adult females of sex trafficking in Central Florida, and also minors of both male and female that they can go to. So there is a process of, we're very victim-centered, and so that means we can't force them, or we're not going to, to even get help, but we let them know that we're here to help them.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being here today. We have run out of time, but I wanted to thank you both for taking the time to be in the show and informing the community on this important issue.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Conozca Sus Derechos show of the Hispanic Bar Association of Central Florida is dedicated to service and education of the community. In our upcoming episodes, we'll continue to discuss the very serious problem of human trafficking in our community. We wish to thank Orange TV for their assistance in bringing you this program. For further assistance, please visit our website, hbacf.com. Thank you for tuning in.